Thank you. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sloan, when you were named CEO after the fake account scandal, you were asked why a career as a Wells Fargo insider like you, why that made you the right person to fix the fundamental problems at the bank. And you said, quote, "Because I've been making change for 29 plus years at Wells Fargo." So I want to take a look at your time at Wells Fargo. From 2011 to 2014, the height of when Wells Fargo was cheating customers by opening fake accounts, you served as the chief financial officer. And as CFO, you spoke to potential Wells Fargo investors a lot. On those calls, you aggressively promoted Wells Fargo's ability to open up new accounts, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
No, you didn't?
No.
Well, here are the transcripts from all of the investor earnings calls that you participated in from 2011 to 2014. I've read through them. And on these calls, no one, not even John Stumpf, who was the CEO at the time, bragged more about Wells Fargo's ability and commitment to open new accounts for existing customers. In the April 2011 call, for example, I think I've marked that one, you said, "I can't wait to get a credit card in every one of our credit-worthy customers' wallets." Nothing about whether your customers wanted or needed a Wells Fargo credit card. All that mattered was opening new accounts. So while you were bragging to investors about opening new accounts on these calls from 2011 to 2014, you also personally owned roughly 2 million shares of Wells Fargo stock. Is that right?
Senator, I don't recall how much stock I owned in Wells Fargo. I'm a very proud shareholder.
It's actually in your SEC filing.
Sure,
So
it's public.
if that's
It's all out there.
accurate, then 2 million shares. So it looks like you had a really good thing going. Talk up Wells Fargo's ability to open new accounts, get investors excited, and hey, if the stock goes up by $1, you make a cool $2 million. Then, in December 2013, almost 3 years into your time as CFO, the LA Times published a long article on the relentless pressure Wells Fargo put on employees to open new accounts. The article was based on a review of internal Wells Fargo documents, court filings, interviews with more than 30 current and former Wells Fargo employees. The article specifically said that employees had opened fake accounts in response to this pressure. Now, you were interviewed for that piece, Mr. Sloan, and you said, quote, "I'm not aware of any overbearing sales culture." That is really interesting phrasing. I'm not aware of any problem. So when the LA Times came to you and showed you concrete evidence of a terrible problem with fake accounts at your bank, did you launch an investigation into the issue before brushing it off?
Senator, first, as it relates to my comments in 2011, I'm proud of the credit card products that we have at Wells Fargo.
That's not the question I'm asking. I just asked, you brushed it off. You said, "I'm not aware of any problem." Did you open an investigation when someone laid out evidence of fake accounts?
Senator, that in that interview, to the best of my recollection with the LA Times, they didn't provide me with any information. It was soon after that, as I mentioned,
so
in
I take
2013.
that as a no. So
That's
when
correct,
you were asked
because
this
by that
question, you did not open an interview. You did not open an inquiry into it. Is that right?
Senator, again, the LA Times didn't provide me with any documentation.
So you had
it was
no
a phone
clue.
call.
All right.
After that time,
did you read the article?
I read the article, yes.
And then you opened an investigation immediately.
At the same time the article was coming out, that was the time when the community bank elevated this issue to the senior leadership
so
team.
let's talk
and that's
about
the
that
time that we began to take action.
Let's talk about that time. You didn't look into the fake accounts, but you went right back to pumping up the stock price by bragging about Wells Fargo's record number of new accounts on your very next investor call. Now let's forward to 2016, 2 months before the fake account scandal became public. You were then the chief operating officer of Wells Fargo. An interviewer asked you whether you thought the bank had pushed sales goals and cross-selling too far, and your answer was, quote, no. The fundamental strategy that we have is not going to change. That is July of 2016, just before this breaks open. According to Wells Fargo's own investigation, by July of 2016, you knew that thousands of employees had been fired for opening fake accounts and other sales violations. You knew aggressive cross-selling goals were to blame, and still, you publicly said the bank didn't have a problem, right?
Senator, that's incorrect. You
didn't say this? That you're
Senator,
quoted?
could you read the entire quote, and could we go through the entire presentation? Because I think in that, Senator, I think in that presentation,
whether or not
you'll
you
see.
pushed employees too far, your answer was no. The fundamental strategy that we have is not going to change. And that's a month
And I was referring to
before
the
this
vision.
breaks
I was
public.
referring to the vision of our company.
The vision,
Of our
including the
company.
fake scandals you were being asked
Senator,
about?
every time I give a presentation to our team members, I start with our vision, which is to ground people in the culture of our company, which is that our job is to satisfy our customers' financial needs and to help them succeed financially.
Sloan, I'm
That's the
glad-
context that I made that statement. Since I've become CEO, I've made fundamental changes to address the issues that we're talking about today.
Mr. Sloan, you were asked about pressure on employees, which caused the fake account scandal. We all know that now. It's public. You knew there was a problem, and when you were asked about it, you lied. This is about personal responsibility. Wells Fargo cheated millions of people for years. The Federal Reserve should remove all of the current board members who served during the fake account scam. And Mr. Sloan, you say you've been making changes at Wells Fargo for 30 years, but you enabled this fake account scam, you got rich off it, and then you tried to cover it up. At best, you were incompetent. At worst, you were complicit. And either way, you should be fired. Wells Fargo needs to start over, and that won't happen until the bank rids itself of people like you who led it into this crisis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, could I respond to that?
Yes, you may.
Okay.
I want an equal amount of time.
Senator, a couple things. First, and I'll get to your criticism of me in a moment, but first let's talk about the board. I think the board has taken very important steps in terms of a thorough, independent investigation that's been made public. Right? That's number one. Number two, the board has taken very strong action in terms of executive accountability that is unfortunately some of the highest in corporate American history. Again, unfortunate. So I don't believe that your criticism of the board are accurate. As it relates to me, again, I think the reason that I'm the right person to run this company today, notwithstanding your criticism, is because I have been making change at this company for 30 years. I have made mistakes. I certainly haven't been perfect. But I think having that knowledge of the company, having the ability to make the change, the actions that I've taken since I become CEO 11 months ago have made fundamental change at this company. So I'm not afraid to make hard decisions when it's needed. And I have the support of 270,000 people. That's why I think I'm the right person.
Can I just make a short comment on this?
Very
I know we're over, but you really want to say, are you kidding? You know what? Look, you've been there for 30 years, and every one of my colleagues on both the Republican side and the Democratic side who've spoken so far have talked about a broken culture at Wells Fargo, have talked about the fact that the problem starts with leadership. The people who were there and leading Wells Fargo during the time of a years-long scam and multiple scams, as our chairman pointed out, those people should not be left in charge of this business. And when you promoted exactly what was wrong with this bank over and over and over. You went to the stock market and you bragged about it. You made money personally off it. When you were asked about it, you did not tell the truth, and you tried to cover it up. Wells Fargo is not going to change with you in charge.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sloan, since becoming CEO, you've said that your priority is rebuilding trust with your employees. At a company-wide meeting this past March, you told your employees, and I want to quote you, Wells Fargo's mission has never been just about improving our bottom line. And then you went on to assure them that Wells Fargo's employees were the most important and valuable resource. Is that right?
Yes, I say that
Good.
often, Senator.
So 2 months after making those comments to your employees, you held an investor day where you and your team made your pitch to Wall Street investors, and you rolled out a new financial plan. And I'd like to submit a copy of that plan for the record, if I may, Mr.
Without objection.
Thank you. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with this presentation, Mr. Sloan. I've also given you a copy of it, too. On pages 26 and 27 of this presentation, you say that Wells Fargo will cut $4 billion in expenses, $2 billion by the end of 2018, another $2 billion by the end of 2019. That is a huge cut, an 8% reduction in non-interest expenses over just a 2-year period. Now, here are some of the ways you describe how you're going to achieve those cuts.
I'm sorry, Senator, could I just correct one thing you said?
Uh-huh.
It's not over a 2-year period. It's over about a 4-year period. That's number one. Number two, what we said is that the first $2 billion that we're going to be reducing, we're going to reinvest that back into the business, so it's not going to the bottom line for our shareholders.
Actually, let me just quote what you said to the investors.
Sure.
You said you were going to consolidating similar operations activities to provide better economies of scale.
So that Center of Excellence, for example.
Can I just read this, please?
Sure, I'm sorry.
Improving processes, including digital technology to automate manual processes, and outsourcing of certain non-differentiated capabilities. Now, that's a lot of corporate buzzwords, but consolidating, automating, and outsourcing sounds an awful lot like firing people. So, Mr. Sloan, given your statements about how much you value your employees, can you tell us today that you will not be firing any employees as part of this $4 billion cut?
I cannot.
Okay.
And the reason for that is, Senator, we have an obligation to run Wells Fargo.
That's all I need to know, because when I look at the numbers, it looks like to me you're going to end up firing tens of thousands of employees to be able to make these numbers. Compensation and benefits for employees by far are Wells Fargo's biggest expense.
There's about 60% of our total expenses, and we're proud of that, by the way, because...
And if we assume an 8% cut in those expenses, that means that you would fire more than 20,000 employees in the next few years. And here's the kicker for me, Mr. Sloan. After telling your employees in March that they were your most valuable resource and that Wells Fargo has, quote, never been just about improving our bottom line, I want to read you what Wells Fargo told Wall Street investors 2 months later in May. Quote, we expect an additional $2 billion in annual expense reductions by the end of 2019. These savings are projected to go to the bottom line.
That's correct. That's what I just said.
So you're literally telling Wall Street you're going to fire thousands of employees.
No, we didn't say that. Senator, you're using math to then...
yeah, I do use math.
Yeah, but you're using math inappropriately, Senator. That's not...
Inappropriately?
No,
by adding numbers?
No, you multiplied two different numbers and you applied it to people.
Kind of
no, Senator, you applied it to people.
I asked you, can you say you're not going to make these cuts by firing people? And you were very direct. You said, no, you can't make that promise.
I have a responsibility to the 270,000 team members to make sure that the company is in existence and successful
so let's
year
talk
after
about that,
year
then.
after
I've
year.
got one more thing I'd like to read from you, and that is, it's clear that you're going to knock out a lot of employees here, and it gets worse. At the same time you're planning to fire employees, you're promising to spend $11.5 billion in the next year buying back Wells Fargo stock. You've made this public announcement. You have that much extra money. So look, if you stick to your current plan, it's clear that Wells Fargo employees making $30,000 or $40,000 a year are going to get screwed, just like they got screwed in the fake account scandal before. It was executives who demanded new accounts be produced at all costs, but it was 5,300 frontline employees who paid for that with their jobs. And now that the fake account scandal has tanked Wells Fargo's reputation, your way of pumping up the bottom line and keeping Wall Street investors happy is to slash costs by firing low-level employees. You know, what happens in these cases, Mr. Chairman, is in these corporate scandals, it's almost always the frontline workers who pay the price, not the executives. And the only way we're ever going to stop these scandals is to hold executives personally accountable, to fire the people who are responsible, and when they break the law, to march some of them out in handcuffs. And until we do that, these scandals are going to continue, and working people are going to continue to take the brunt of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.